The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. Chapter 4. Everyone was in good health. You couldn't really call it ill health. That Ivan Ilyich sometimes said he had a strange taste in his mouth and an odd discomfort in the left side of his stomach. But it so happened that the discomfort began to grow, not into pain, not yet, but into a constant sense of heaviness in his side and into a foul mood. And the foul mood, growing stronger and stronger, began to spoil the pleasant light and proper life that had only just settled over the Golovan household. Husband and wife quarreled more and more often. Soon the lightness and pleasantness fell away, and even the propriety was barely held together. The scenes came back. Once again only a few small islands remained where husband and wife could meet without an explosion. And Praskovia Fyodorovna could now say, not without reason, that her husband had a difficult character. With her usual habit of exaggerating, she said he had always had this dreadful character, and that it had taken all her good nature to put up with it for 20 years. It was true that the quarrels now started with him. His fault-finding always began right before dinner, and often just as he started to eat, over the soup. You would notice that a dish was chipped, or the food wasn't right, or his son had his elbow on the table, or his daughter's hair was done wrong. And for all of it he blamed Praskovia Fyodorovna. At first she snapped back and said unpleasant things to him, but twice he flew into such a rage at the start of dinner that she understood. This was illness, something that eating set off in him. So she reined herself in. She no longer answered back, only hurried everyone through the meal. And she gave herself great credit for this meekness. Having decided that her husband had a terrible character and had made her life a misery, she began to pity herself. And the more she pitied herself, the more she hated him. She began to wish he would die, and yet she couldn't wish it, because then there would be no salary, and that turned her against him even more. She considered herself profoundly unhappy precisely because even his death could not save her. She grew bitter, she hid it, and that hidden bitterness of hers fed his own. After one scene in which Ivan Ilyich had been especially unfair, and after which he admitted when they talked it over that yes, he was irritable, but it was the illness. She told him that if he was ill he should get treatment, and demanded that he go and see a famous doctor. He went. It was all just as he expected, all just the way these things are always done. The waiting, the doctor's put-on air of importance, which he knew well, the very same air he recognized in himself in court, the tapping, the listening, the questions with answers settled in advance and obviously unnecessary. The look of significance that said, just place yourself in our hands, and we will arrange everything. We know beyond any doubt how to arrange it all, the same way for everyone, whoever you please. It was exactly like court. The performance he put on in court over the accused, the famous doctor now put on over him. The doctor said, this and this indicate that you have such and such inside you. But if that is not confirmed by tests of this and that, then we must assume such and such. And if we assume such and such, then, and so on. For Ivan Ilyich, only one question mattered. Is my condition dangerous or not? But the doctor ignored that question as out of order. From the doctor's point of view, it was an idle question, not worth discussing. There was only the weighing of probabilities. A floating kidney, chronic catarrh, appendicitis. There was no question of Ivan Ilyich's life. There was a dispute between a floating kidney and an appendix. And before Ivan Ilyich's eyes, the doctor settled that dispute brilliantly in favor of the appendix, with the reservation that the urine test might turn up new evidence, and then the matter would be reviewed. All of it was exactly what Ivan Ilyich himself had done 1,000 times over men on trial, in that same brilliant manner. Just as brilliantly the doctor delivered his summing up, glancing over his glasses at the accused in triumph, cheerfully even. From the doctor's summary, Ivan Ilyich drew one conclusion: things were bad, and that to the doctor and probably to everyone else, it was all the same, but for him it was bad. This conclusion struck him painfully, stirring in him a great pity for himself and a great anger at this doctor who could be indifferent to such a question. But he said nothing. He stood up, laid the money on the table, sighed, and said, "We sick people probably ask you a lot of questions that are out of order. But tell me, generally speaking, is this illness dangerous or not?" The doctor gave him a stern look through his glasses with one eye, as if to say, "Prisoner, if you do not keep within the bounds of the questions put to you, I will be forced to have you removed from the courtroom. I have already told you what I considered necessary and appropriate, said the doctor. The tests will show the rest. And the doctor bowed. Ivan Ilyich walked out slowly, climbed glumly into his sleigh, and drove home. The whole way he kept turning over everything the doctor had said, trying to translate all those tangled, murky scientific words into plain language, and to read in them the answer to one question. Is it bad? Is it very bad with me, or is it still nothing but? And it seemed to him that the meaning of everything the doctor had said was very bad. Everything in the streets looked sad to him. The cab drivers were sad, the houses were sad, the passers-by in the shops were sad, and this pain, this dull, aching pain that never stopped for a second, seemed, in the light of the doctor's murky words, to take on a different, more serious meaning. Ivan Ilyich listened to it now with a new and heavy feeling. He got home and started telling his wife. But, in the middle of his account, his daughter came in with her hat on. She and her mother were about to go out. With an effort, she sat down to listen to this tedious business, but she couldn't take it for long, and her mother didn't hear him to the end either. "Well, I'm very glad," said his wife. "So now mind you take your medicine properly. Give me the prescription. I'll send Garrison to the pharmacy." And she went to get dressed. He had hardly drawn breath while she was in the room. When she went out, he sighed heavily. "Well then," he said, "maybe it really is nothing yet." He began taking the medicines and following the doctor's orders, which changed after the urine test. But right at that point, some confusion crept in, with the test itself and with what was supposed to follow it. The doctor himself couldn't be reached, and what was being done turned out not to be what the doctor had told him. Either he had forgotten or lied or was hiding something from him. Still, Ivan Ilyich followed the instructions to the letter, and at first he found comfort in that. From the time of that visit, Ivan Ilyich's main occupation became following the doctor's orders to the letter on hygiene and on medicines, and listening to his pain, to every function of his body. His main interests became human illness and human health. When people around him talked about the sick, the dead, the recovered, especially about any illness that resembled his own, he would listen, hiding his agitation, ask questions, and apply what he heard to his own case. The pain did not lessen, but Ivan Ilyich worked at forcing himself to think he was getting better, and he could fool himself as long as nothing upset him. But the moment there was trouble with his wife, a setback at work, a bad hand at cards, he felt the full force of his illness at once. There was a time when he had shrugged off such setbacks, telling himself, "I'll fix this soon, I'll fight through it, success is coming, the grand slam is coming." Now every setback cut him down and threw him into despair. He would tell himself, "There, just as I was starting to mend, just as the medicine was beginning to work, along comes this cursed misfortune, this unpleasantness." And he raged at the misfortune or at the people who caused it and were killing him. And he could feel that this rage was killing him, and still he couldn't hold it back. You would think it should have been clear to him that this fury at circumstances and at people made his illness worse, and that he therefore ought to pay no attention to unpleasant accidents. But he reasoned exactly the other way around. He said he needed calm. He watched for anything that disturbed that calm, and at the slightest disturbance he flew into irritation. What made his condition worse was that he read medical books and consulted doctors. The decline was so even that he could deceive himself by comparing one day with the next. The difference was small. But whenever he consulted a doctor, it seemed to him that things were going downhill and fast. And despite that, he kept consulting doctors. That month, he went to see another famous specialist. This second celebrity told him almost the same as the first, but framed his questions differently. And the consultation only deepened Ivan Ilyich's doubt and fear. A friend of a friend, a very good doctor, diagnosed the illness differently again, and though he promised recovery, his questions and guesses tangled Ivan Ilyich up even more and strengthened his doubt. A homeopath diagnosed it in yet another way and gave him a remedy, which Ivan Ilyich took in secret for about a week. But when the week brought no relief, he lost faith in the earlier treatments, and in this one too, and sank into an even deeper gloom. One day a lady he knew was talking about healings worked through icons. Ivan Ilyich caught himself listening closely, testing whether the story might be true. That frightened him. "Have I really gone so soft in the head?" he said to himself. "Nonsense. It's all rubbish. No more giving in to jitters. I'll choose one doctor and stick strictly to his treatment. That's what I'll do. That's the end of it. No more thinking about it. I'll follow the treatment strictly until summer, and then we'll see. An end to all this wavering. Easy to say, impossible to do. The pain in his side wore at him, seemed to keep growing, became constant. The taste in his mouth grew stranger and stranger. It seemed to him that his breath smelled of something disgusting. His appetite and his strength kept fading. There was no fooling himself. Something terrible was happening inside him, something new and more significant than anything that had ever happened to Ivan Ilyich in his whole life. And he alone knew about it. The people around him didn't understand, or didn't want to understand, and thought everything in the world was going on as before. This tormented Ivan Ilyich more than anything. The household, above all his wife and daughter, who were in the very thick of the social season, understood nothing. He could see it, and they were annoyed that he was so gloomy and so demanding, as if that were his fault. However much they tried to hide it, he saw that he was in their way. He saw too that his wife had worked out a fixed attitude toward his illness, and held to it no matter what he said or did. The attitude was this. You know, she would tell her friends, Ivan Ilyich can't do what all decent people do and simply follow his treatment. Today he takes his drops, eats what he's told, goes to bed on time. Tomorrow, if I'm not watching, he suddenly forgets his medicine, eats sturgeon, which is forbidden, and sits over cards until 1 a.m. Oh, when have I done that? Ivan Ilyich would say, annoyed. Once at Pyotr Ivanovitch's. And yesterday with Shebek. It made no difference. I couldn't have slept for the pain anyway. Whatever the reason, you'll never get well this way. Praskovya Fyodorovna's outward attitude to her husband's illness, the one she expressed to others and to him, was that the illness was Ivan Ilyitch's own fault, and that the whole thing was one more unpleasantness he was inflicting on his wife. Ivan Ilyich felt that this came out of her, without her meaning it. That didn't make it any easier for him. At court, Ivan Ilyich noticed, or thought he noticed, the same strange attitude toward himself. One moment it seemed to him that people were eyeing him as a man who would soon be vacating his post. The next, his friends would suddenly start teasing him, in a friendly way, about his imaginary illness, as if that thing, that terrible, horrifying, unheard-of thing that had taken root inside him, sucking at him without pause and dragging him irresistibly off somewhere, were the most delightful subject for a joke. Schwartz irritated him most of all. The playfulness, the vitality, the impeccable good form, all of it reminding Ivan Ilyich of himself 10 years earlier. Friends came over to make up a table, and they sat down. They dealt, flexing the new cards. He sorted his diamonds, 7 of them. His partner said no trumps, and supported him with 2 diamonds. What more could you ask? It should have felt cheerful, brisk. They were headed for a slam. And suddenly Ivan Ilyich feels that sucking pain, that taste in his mouth, and there is something grotesque to him in the idea that he could be happy about a slam. He looks at Mikhail Mikhailovich, his partner, how he raps the table with his vigorous hand, and politely, indulgently holds back from scooping up the tricks, pushing them over to Ivan Ilyich instead, so that Ivan Ilyich can have the pleasure of gathering them in, without any trouble, without reaching too far. What, does he think I'm so weak I can't reach across the table? Thinks Ivan Ilyich. He forgets which cards are trumps, trumps his own side's winning trick, and loses the slam, down 3, and worst of all, he sees how Mikhail Mikhailovich suffers over it, and he himself doesn't care. And it is terrible to think about why he doesn't care. They all see that it's hard for him, and they tell him, we can stop if you're tired. Get some rest. Rest? No, he isn't tired at all. They finish the rubber. Everyone is somber and silent. Ivan Ilyich feels that he has brought this gloom down on them, and that he cannot lift it. They have supper and drive home, and Ivan Ilyich is left alone with the knowledge that his life is poisoned for him, and is poisoning the lives of others, and that the poison is not weakening, but soaking deeper and deeper into his whole being. And with that knowledge, and with the physical pain, and with the terror on top of it, he had to go to bed, and often lie awake from pain for most of the night, and in the morning he had to get up again, get dressed, drive to court, talk, write, or if he stayed home, live through the same 24 hours of the day, every one of them a torment. And he had to live like this, on the edge of the abyss, alone, without one single person who might understand him and pity him.